Welcome to a special edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. This is a candidate forum for the State Board of Education District 8. I'm Jerry Simon, a League member and moderator for the forum. The League of Women Voters never supports or opposes political parties or candidates. We present this forum solely for voter education. Here is our format. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement. We'll follow that with questions and answers. The questions have been prepared by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will answer every question and will have up to 90 seconds to do so. And we'll end our forum with 1-minute closing statements by the candidates. A timekeeper will alert the candidates when they have 30 seconds of time remaining and when to stop speaking. Before we began the forum this evening, our candidates drew lots to determine their initial speaking order, and I will introduce you to the candidates in that order now. 2 of the candidates will advance to the general election in November. The candidates are Bob Meyers, Pat McPherson, and Deborah Neary. And we'll go right to our opening statements, beginning with Bob Meyers.
Thank you. My name is Bob Meyers, and I'm a candidate for District 8 State Board of Education because I really believe in public education. I've been involved in public education K-12 for 34 years and then did some work at the Metropolitan Community College part-time as an academic advisor. And I've also taught educational leadership courses at the university level, the master's level courses. So I feel that my experience and my background give me a solid basis upon which to draw to make the decisions necessary to make sure that every child has a great school in the state of Nebraska. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat McPherson.
Hello, I'm Pat McPherson, and I'm asking to be reelected and asking for your vote in the upcoming primary election. During the last 4 years I've served on the board, I've had an opportunity to bring a very business-like approach to the board. Unlike my fellow members who are basically all educators, I come out of the business community. Now, I love teachers, don't get me wrong. I had great teachers at Field Club Elementary and Central High School here in Omaha. But I bring a different approach. I've asked questions. Why do we send 7 of 8 board members to a national convention at $2,500 apiece? Why don't we have a strategic plan? Those are the types of things that I've worked very hard on. We've now got a budget and a finance committee that we've never had before. I've got a record of community service, and I look forward and ask again for your vote in the upcoming primary.
Thank you. And Deborah Neary.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Deborah Neary, and I'm running for the State Department of Education in District 8. And I've been working in education-focused nonprofits for the last 25 years in leadership positions. I've also had the opportunity to work on policy making and policy research for the last 25 years as well. And I have been, in my professional life, I've led nonprofit businesses, some of them with multi-million-dollar budgets, and I do have a lot of business experience that I will bring. I've learned to analyze data and evidence-based practices, and my whole life's passion has been focused on supporting vulnerable youth, our school teachers, and our school districts. My husband and I have had 8 foster youth that we've helped raise. I have a sister with learning and intellectual disability that I support, and I also have been serving for many years on a number of government and nonprofit board of directors, all of which focus on supporting our school districts, our youth, and our teachers. Thank you.
Here's our first question, which will go first to Pat McPherson. The results of the statewide assessments were recently published. There seems to have been no improvement in the prevalence of low test scores in schools with high poverty and/or African American and Hispanic populations. What can be done, and what will you specifically do as a member of the State Board of Education?
Well, I think, like others, I'm dismayed by what I've seen as the results. One of the things that I've worked very hard with on the State Board of Education is establishing a strategic plan. And that strategic plan basically deals with what we need to do to improve education, particularly in those low-performing areas where we have these high learning gaps. And ESSA, the new Every Student Succeeds Act, requires the state of Nebraska and all states to do something with to pay special attention to the lowest 5% of performing schools. We've got to work very hard at this learning gap. We've got 3 priority schools right now that we deal with in Nebraska, and it's going to be a challenge when we expand that to probably 80 schools very shortly. But we're learning some things from what we've done on priority schools, which the legislature instructed us to do. And we're going to have a real challenge as we go forward. But the federal law mandates that. And I'm going to work very hard to do whatever I can to eliminate the learning gap that we see in these schools.
Thank you. Deborah, Neary.
Thank you. You know, because of my experiences of having 8 foster youth, I have been exposed over a 25-year period to generational poverty, the impact of race inequality, the first and second generation immigration struggles, mass incarceration, and the impact of trauma on our youth. And all of these things come into the classroom and have an impact. And teachers and school districts alone shouldn't have to face these challenges alone. We need to do something to support them. Our achievement gaps here, our graduation rates, the last research study I saw were about 89% in Nebraska, but there's a huge disparity when you're talking about special audiences with minorities or other vulnerable populations. And my focus, as I said in my introduction, is really to help close those achievement gaps, because I truly believe that, like a well-designed building that helps support all audiences coming to it, and when they do right by people that have special needs, it makes it a more welcoming visit for other people to the building. Well, that's how I look at education. It's like when we're helping our most vulnerable populations be successful, I really believe it's going to help raise the standards and raise excellence for every single student, because we all win when everybody is being successful and productive. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Meyers.
The problem with low achieving schools goes beyond the school. And I sincerely believe that until as a society we're willing to deal with systemic poverty and deal with that issue, that we won't really have as much success as we would like. It's very difficult for children who don't know where they're going to sleep at night or don't have enough to eat when they come to school to do well in class, let alone on tests. That being said, I think that I'm very appreciative of the approach that's now being taken, whereas when school students do not score well on tests, that we're offering assistance and we're offering help. And the State Department of Education is helping that and helping the teachers and the schools and their students to find better success. And some of that has been successful at this time. That's the kind of thing that needs to continue. Punishment doesn't help. And as I tell people all the time, if you go into the schools where students are struggling, you won't find teachers who work any harder than those teachers in that school. So there's a lot of problems that occur that aren't always school problems, and we need to work with student learning, but we need to work with students as a whole. I think we're on the right track, and it's going to be a continuing question, a continuing problem, and it's going to require a lot of attention from all of us.
Thank you. Here's our next question. The idea of eliminating the State Board of Education and giving control to the governor was recently floated in the unicameral but went nowhere. The senator who introduced it said the idea was worth considering because the state board was out of touch with Nebraskans. How do you handle that statement or evaluate that statement? We'll begin with Deborah Neary.
Thank you. Yes, I feel very strongly that we need to support our public schools, and that we also need to have accountability back to taxpayers. And with that comes, an elected board that can represent taxpayers, that taxpayers can go and have their voice heard. And research shows that when you have an elected board, that parents and families are going to feel much more engaged in the process because they feel like they have a voice. And also, I really believe that we need to keep partisan politics out of our education system. It's like the future of our youth is too important to be having partisan politics involved in these discussions. And so an elected board, especially like we are all, this is a nonpartisan race. And I do believe that it helps us focus more on what the real issues are and give parents and families and students the voice that they need.
Thank you. Bob Meyers.
I think the idea of having an appointed board by the governor is a bad idea, because I think that you then could have the possibility of the board changing every 4 or 8 years, depending upon who the governor is. And I think then you get into a political arena that simply isn't fitting. I believe that it's very important, even though our districts are very large, that we have people who are responsive to parents, to teachers, and to patrons who want to find out what's going on with their schools and make them work. And I think that the way that Nebraska operates is extremely valuable. I really resist the idea of having a governor be appointed, or simply having the legislature be in charge of the school. I think that we have experts in our schools and our local boards, and they need the assistance that we can provide for them, and guidance through the rules and certification and all of those other things that the board takes part in. And I think that's the most helpful kind of arena. And if it becomes a political appointment, I'm afraid that we're going to lose focus on the real goal, which is educating students.
Thank you. Pat McPherson.
I believe it's important to keep an elected board. Having a governor, and I like our current governor, but having a governor that has the total power over the appointments to that board will not deal properly with the 244 school districts in this state that have individual needs. And one governor cannot basically understand the needs of all of those individual schools or those school districts. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Has the board gone astray? I don't know that it's gone astray. I think there are people that feel that our standards are too much Common Core based, and I agree with that. I think there are people that take exception with some of our votes, but that's part of what a board does. And each member represents a different district, a different constituency, and I think it's important to maintain that so that we keep that influence coming from the parents and the teachers and the job creators across the state as we look forward to what challenges we face in the upcoming years. So I would disagree with the appointment by the governor, and I also think it puts into jeopardy the appointment of a commissioner, where you could also have a commissioner being reappointed by the board every few years.
Thank you. Here's our next question. In the past several years, statewide assessment has gone from being teacher-written and teacher-scored to being almost entirely nationally manufactured and scored. Aside from cost, what's the reason for this change, and do you support the change? And we'll start with Bob Meyers.
Part of the difficulty with the STARS program, the teacher assessed, was that the thought was that sometimes people were not being honest or fair in those assessments. I think that that also has been a problem with standardized tests. I have a real concern that sometimes we over-test and we take a look at what they do, and too often our tests really aren't measuring what we hope they measure. For example, reading is critical, and we all realize the essence of that. We look at our math and science scores and we get really frustrated and think that they're not high enough. And if we look back at how those test questions are written on the standardized test, most of those are reading questions. And if students have trouble reading, if English isn't their first language, and some of those other kinds of handicaps get in the way, those students are not going to score as well on those tests. So I think as long as we use the tests and use them as a way to gauge where we're going, and that's why I like the standards. I think if we set those out, I like what we're doing now. I really am opposed to rank ordering schools, because I think it creates a problem for those schools that rank low and with parents and the other things. Standardized tests are difficult. Too often they're misinterpreted by the public because the information really isn't what they think they're getting.
Thank you. Pat McPherson.
Well, as Bob said, I think we're all concerned about testing. And I think the former STARS testing was inappropriate and that it didn't really allow any comparison at all. And what we have done since I've been on the board is we have approved the use of the ACT. And as you've seen from the results recently, they're not very encouraging in all respects, but at least we have a method now that we can kind of compare and look at schools and say, how's this school doing versus that school? How are the kids in our state doing versus the kids in Iowa or some other state? With the ACT, we've at least got something that gives us some standards, I think, as far as comparison goes. And one of the nice things about using the ACT is that since the board has adopted that as its test, the local school districts are no longer paying for that. And all the children that want to take that test, every 11th grader gets to take that for free. So basically what happens is kids that might not have taken that test before, that might not have thought they had an aptitude, are now getting the opportunity to take it. And then absolutely after that, they can retest or they can take it again in the 12th grade. But it's a great opportunity, I believe, for those students.
Thank you. Deborah Neary.
Yeah, I've been working in the data world for the last 10 years, and we definitely need some way to have accountability and transparency so that decisions can be made. And I am really excited about the new AQuest system that is in place now to help assess schools and look at all sorts of different data to do that. And the new SCAS about testing that will happen, I love that our state board has made the decision that they're requiring one test only annually, leaving those decisions up to the school district if they want to continue to have more testing. And these new tests, what I love about them is they are going to be much more helpful to all types of learners. It isn't just one size fits all. There's a lot of equity that's taken into account for these tests. They're more cost efficient and time efficient for teachers. But also, you mentioned the ACT, and it's like there's still problems with that because, you know, what we're seeing is in those school districts that have more resources, or the parents that have more resources, and those students that are allowed to take all the ACT prep classes or take the ACT multiple times. I mean, there's still a lot of gaps there that we need to look at, and how can we level and prepare everybody for success, because that's what we want to do, is make sure that all of our students in Nebraska are prepared for a bright future.
Thank you. Here's our next question. Nebraska is one of the few states that does not allow charter schools. Do you support allowing charter schools to come to Nebraska? Why or why not? We'll start with Pat McPherson.
I am not a strong supporter of charter schools, but I am a supporter of school choice. I think every parent has the right and obligation to do what they feel is best for their child. We have school choice to a great extent in Nebraska. Children can opt out of one school district into another. That's not an issue. We have parochial schools, we have private schools, we have some funded in Omaha by very wealthy individuals that have chosen to fund their own private schools. I don't think any child should be deprived of going to a school of their choice. If that happens to be a charter school, then we as a board will have to deal with that. But the fact is that we as a board cannot determine whether there are charter schools in Nebraska. That is a function of the legislature, and they have not done that. So there are no charter schools in Nebraska, and there's no effort in the legislature that I know of at this point to do that. So I would just say, I think that we kind of get caught up in this idea, well, you're for charter schools or you're not. The truth of the matter is the legislature is going to have to make that decision. And at that point, it'll be up to our board to accredit those schools or to approve those schools, just as we do every parochial or private school or every public school in the state of Nebraska.
Thank you. Deborah Neary.
Yeah, thank you. You know, in Nebraska, you know, charter schools might be an okay for other states, although I've read a lot about the failures that occur with charter schools. But in Nebraska, most people don't realize that our legislation is so flexible that we already allow for so much innovation and creativity to take place. I don't see any reason for our legislature to make changes to that. I mean, we've had innovative solutions like the one taken on by Elkhorn School District, Millard, and OPS, who created their own focus school together and was very innovative and successful for that. I'm good friends with the principal of that school, Brent Anderson, and we work together on a lot of issues to bring that same sort of innovation to all of our school districts to help kids be successful. But there are a lot of innovative ways that we can bring new ideas, and we do need to bring change to our schools. But we also don't want to be pulling funding away from our public school systems. And, that, to me, that's the bottom line. Whenever I hear people talk about choice, sometimes in the background I'm hearing privatization, and we don't want to have that happen here in Nebraska, because we see what happened to our foster care system and how it ended up costing our state millions of dollars. But people don't realize that we already have supports for, I'm going to stop there because I just ran out of time. Thank you.
Bob Meyers.
I've been opposed to charter schools for two different reasons. First of all, when we look at charter schools across the country, many of those have been started by private entrepreneurs, and even though they take public school funds, we have a lot of people getting very wealthy, and the funds aren't going to the teachers or to the school or to the students. Even those that have not, and the schools, charter schools that have been successful are those where they have very strict rules. And in many cases, if the parents or the students don't adhere to those very strict rules, they're no longer allowed to attend. To me, that's a private school. In public school, we don't have that option. Every public school takes all of the children. We do our best to bring them to their best education. The other reason that I'm opposed to charter schools is that many times they simply aren't able, because of their focus, to offer the kinds of things that I think are important for a well-rounded student. Many times they don't have the arts. They don't offer some of the other kinds of extensions to education that I think are critical to really making students be practical and effective and creative. And the last part of that is that, as the research shows, for the most part, charter schools have no better findings than the traditional public school. Their scores are not any better. The students aren't learning better. They simply are a way to take money away from the traditional school, and I'm opposed to that and will remain so.
Thank you. Well, that was quick through our question segment of the forum, and now we're ready to go to our closing statements. So we will start with Deborah Neary.
Oh, okay. Boy, that did go fast. I want to first just thank the League of Women Voters who put out these information sessions. I've been a member of the League of Women Voters for 25 years, and I really believe in their nonpartisan way they approach all issues, and I appreciate that. And for me tonight, I hope listeners are going to remember that I have a strong background in working in education-focused nonprofits, and I do believe that we need to bring support to our schools and our teachers and help them solve some of the challenges that they're facing in the classrooms today. And I do focus on innovation, and I strongly believe that we can't be looking at how we did things 20 years ago and thinking that's still going to fit today. When I think about my own office and how much it's changed in the last 20 years because of technology changes, we need to bring that kind of change and innovation to our school districts so that every student can be successful. And I hope if people want more information, they'll visit me at debneary.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Meyers.
Education has always been a very important part of my life, and that's why I'm running for the state board. And I think it's critical that we do the very best we can to work with our educational professionals, the Department of Education, to make sure that education moves forward. I've always told parents and students when I was principal or superintendent, that the research shows us that by the time those children are my age, and that was some time ago when I was still in the public schools, that research says they would hold 8 different jobs, 6 of which don't exist yet. So it's important that students learn how to be learners, and that's very critical. What I can bring to the state board is a pledge that every child, every parent, and every patron, regardless of their race, their color, their creed, their national origin, their gender identity, or their sexual orientation will be treated with dignity and respect. I think decisions need to be made based on research, on my educational experience, and not on political or religious ideologies.
Thank you. And Pat McPherson.
Thank you very much, and thank the League of Women Voters for doing this. And I would again ask for the voters' support in the upcoming election. I have spent the last 4 years on the board trying to bring a different outlook to how we do things. I am opposed to keeping the status quo. In many ways, we're teaching children the same way that we taught them 100 years ago. When I got on the board was running very much like it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. That's the reason we've developed a strategic plan. That's the reason we have now have a finance and budget committee to look over the millions of dollars that are spent every year, taxpayer dollars, your dollars. I want to see equity in education. I believe that every kid, regardless of gender or sex, deserves the same education. We've got a big job ahead, and I'm going to continue to fight to eliminate that achievement gap and to make every student, or give every student the opportunity to succeed and have a great Nebraska job.
Thank you. That's the end of our forum for the State Board of Education District 8. We'd like to thank all the candidates for participating this evening in the forum. Thank you. The League of Women Voters is doing quite a few forums this primary season. Just to run through a few of them, we've done the Republican primary for Douglas County Assessor Register of Deeds. We will be doing OPPD districts, subdistricts 1 and 8. We'll be doing a few of the legislative districts, District 8 definitely, and we will have Omaha Public School Board. We've also done a program about the Omaha Public Schools bond issue that you can find on our website and also link to it on our YouTube channel. And we are also doing a forum with the Omaha Press Club on April 19th, which will be the Democratic Forum for the 2nd Congressional District candidates. That will be live streamed on WWT.com and also on Facebook, their Facebook page, and then it will be replayed the next day at 1 o'clock on WWT Channel 6. So for the League of Women Voters, I'm Jerry Simon reminding you to inform yourself about the issues and the candidates, and in the primary election on May 15th, go vote Omaha.